Hello! In this video, I will be responding to the Prophet of Zod's video, A Weak Excuse for Telling Atheists to Shut Up. This is a response to Squared's wager, the argument that atheists should delete their YouTube channels. Godless Engineer also made a response called All Atheist Creators Should Delete Their Channels, apparently featuring Apologetic Squared. Wait, apparently featuring? John, if there was any confusion, your video did feature me. Anyways, GE's main argument, as I see it, is the same as the Prophet of Zod's, so I'm going to respond to both of them in this video. Now, I'm not going to be arguing that Squared's wager works. I think that Rationality Rules has given some good responses to it that at least put the argument into question. So all I'm saying here is that if Squared's wager does fail, it's not for the reasons that the Prophet of Zod and Godless Engineer have presented. So, without further ado, what is their main argument?
He just stated, as a fact, that the utility of being a Christian is infinity because the Christian goes to heaven. But here's the problem. I don't believe it, and he hasn't done anything to demonstrate it. Yet this flatly unverified assertion is all he bases his argument on.
His argument already has a fatal flaw in it. He is assuming that Christians already have this infinite utility that he claims they do.
Everything he says from here rests on this simple assertion.
Just to reinforce, all of this is built upon the presupposition that this infinite utility exists.
They object that I never proved that Christians do have this infinite utility in my video. Well, they are technically correct, but Squared's wager isn't built on the assumption that being Christian grants infinite utility. Rather, the argument is based on the expected utility of being a Christian. Here, I'll illustrate the difference. Say you get a lottery ticket, like for your birthday or something. The grand prize is $20 million, but there's only a 1 in a million shot at getting the grand prize once the winning numbers are drawn. So, what's the utility of this ticket? Well, you don't know. The winning numbers haven't been drawn yet. This ticket will either have no utility or the utility of $20 million, but it hasn't yet been revealed which option will materialize. Its true utility is unknown. Obviously, though, we shouldn't treat the ticket like it's worthless, nor like it's worth $20 million. We should treat the ticket like it has some value in between 0 and $20 million. This is where expected utility comes in. We can calculate that the expected utility of this ticket is 1 in a million multiplied by $20 million, which is $20. This expected utility gives us a guide on how to act until we get more information. This value is obtained by multiplying the probability of getting such and such an outcome by the utility of that outcome. So, returning to Squared's wager, I know an atheist wouldn't agree that Christians have infinite utility, so I didn't make that a premise of the argument. Rather, my argument is that my viewer, even if they're an atheist, should think that the expected utility which Christians possess is the probability that Christianity is true, which an atheist might think is very small, I know, times the utility Christians would get if Christianity is true, which is infinity. So an atheist themselves should conclude that Christians have infinite expected utility so long as they think that probability of Christianity's truth is greater than 0. Now, quick tangent. Why think the probability of Christianity's truth is greater than 0? Well, if you think that the probability of Christianity's truth is equal to 0, then it actually becomes impossible to rationally change your mind about that. Like, imagine every day from now until the end of time, I come up with a new cool argument that makes Christianity twice as likely in your mind as it previously was. Well, if the probability of Christianity's truth starts out at 0, then all my efforts have done literally nothing, since multiplying 0 by 2 over and over again still yields 0. Now, this is a bit of an oversimplification of Bayesian regularity, but my point still stands. If we're being rational about probability, evidence is sort of going to act like multiplication, in that if we start out at 0, we're never going to leave there. So, if someone said that the probability of Christianity's truth is 0, then nothing rationally could change their mind. Even if angels appeared to them, a booming voice from heaven said Jesus is Lord, and any other evidence you could possibly want, they wouldn't budge. If that's you, please let me know. It would save me a lot of time-consuming conversations. but I'm going to go out on a limb and say that most atheists would want to say they would believe Christianity if presented with enough evidence. So, they implicitly don't think the probability of Christianity is 0. Anyways, back to the lottery ticket. You might believe that the ticket isn't the winning ticket and therefore has a utility of 0, but you should nonetheless act like the ticket is worth $20. And that also means that other people shouldn't destroy your ticket since it is something with value, even if it's just expected value. So, on the flip side, an atheist might believe that being Christian gives someone no benefit whatsoever. But the way they should act is as if being Christian is infinitely valuable. This means that causing someone to cease being Christian would be a very immoral action. Now, Prophet of Zod forms a reductio of this kind of reasoning.
As of this moment, I hereby assert that anybody who does any form of math correctly will be tortured forever by aliens, while anybody who only does incorrect math will be rewarded forever by the aliens. This means, by virtue of my assertion, there's no infinite utility for only doing incorrect math, right?
Man, those aliens would love the comment section of my original video. Anyways, we can broaden this argument. The utility of any action X is the probability that X would give infinite utility multiplied by infinity. This probability is going to be above 0 for almost all actions, since evidence could, at least in principle, convince me that a given action does lead to infinite utility. So that means that the expected utility of most actions is infinity, including but not limited to becoming a Christian, becoming an atheist, doing math wrong, doing math right, and sneezing. So, how should we react to this revelation that all actions have an infinite expected utility? Well, my strategy here is to look at a case where someone is presented with multiple courses of action, all with infinite expected utility, where we can all, hopefully, agree on what the proper reaction is, and extrapolating from there. So here we go. Say Jim is faced with 2 doors. One door has a 99% chance of sending him to an infinitely awesome afterlife that will last forever. The other door has a 1% chance of sending him to that infinitely awesome afterlife. We do the expected utility calculations and find that both doors have an expected utility of infinity. Coolio. Now, is picking one of these doors better than the other? I think it's obvious that, yes, picking the door with a 99% chance is better. But why? Why is it better? Well, it's because this door has a higher chance of resulting in infinite utility. Now, you have some options here for getting the decision theory to reflect this obvious conclusion. Maybe we can use real numbers or just stipulate a new axiom, but I'm not going to get into that here. Because if you're on board with my reasoning in this case, then it seems we could apply it with a more complicated case too, where every action has infinite expected utility. We just find the action that has the highest probability of yielding infinite utility and do that. Although, this kind of reasoning is more about Pascal's wager. If we want to talk about squared's wager, then we'd be talking about the probability of others receiving infinite utility. If a channel decreased someone's probability of getting infinite utility, then, as squared's wager goes, this channel would be morally problematic. Anyways, that's my response to the philosophical objections from the Prophet of Zod and Godless Engineer against squared's wager. However, before going, I'd like to respond to a pragmatic argument against presenting the wager, and we'll close out with some allegations against my character. So the Prophet of Zod argues that
where this gets serious is when his flirtation with theocratic rhetoric gets into the ears of people who are better positioned than he is to bully atheists. This is a real problem that affects real people, many of whom reach out to me in desperation, asking what to do when they get punished, harassed, or ostracized for expressing anything that to any degree runs contrary to Christian teaching. This, unlike hell, is something we know people face, and it's rooted in the demand that everybody act according to the premises of Christianity regardless of whether they believe it and stay silent if they don't. Apologetics Squared is directly promoting this entitled dominionist mentality, and in doing so is contributing to the problem. And while I never offer any suggestion this means he should delete his channel, because that would be a garbage thing to do, I hope he's ready to shoulder responsibility for how he's encouraging people to see and act toward others.
Now, before anything else, I'd like to point out the irony in all of this. We're essentially making the same argument here. Hey, you shouldn't make videos like this, because once you consider the chance it has of promoting a large amount of harm, you'll see that making this content is morally wrong. So we're practically on the same page. But I'm kinda getting mixed messages from the Prophet of Zod. Going back a bit, he thinks my argument fails because I'm simply asserting Christian doctrine without arguing that it's true.
Thus, it's nothing more than a self-referencing description of Christian doctrine.
That's not quite right, because I also use decision theory to explain why atheists should care about Christian doctrine, but setting that aside, if all I'm doing is asserting basic, widespread Christian beliefs, then what sort of damage could I be causing? Like, I agree with the Zodmeister that there are these power dynamics out there with Christians bullying atheists, and that that's terrible, and if I am perpetuating or causing these dynamics, I want to know that. But if these bullies are Christians, and therefore believe basic widespread Christian doctrine, then what effect would me asserting basic widespread Christian doctrine have on them, positive or negative? It seems it would have none, since they already believe that stuff. As an analogy, the idea that, hey man, if you're wrong, you miss out on heaven, is as old as Christianity itself. Pascal's wager, however, is an attempt to make this rigorous with decision theory to show an atheist why they should even bother caring. Thus, Pascal's wager wouldn't have any effect on the beliefs or attitudes of Christians. Likewise, the idea that, hey man, if you're wrong, then you're leading people astray, was not my invention. I didn't come up with it. All I did in my video was attempt to see if we could use the same decision theory employed with Pascal's wager to see if an atheist should care about it, all presented in a lighthearted and fairly abstract way. This might make an atheist view their own actions differently, but as far as I can tell, a Christian's attitude would remain unchanged. And my experience interacting with my viewers bears this reasoning out. Not a single person I've talked to watched my video and concluded that we should censor atheists. Some Christians definitely did think that my argument entailed that, but they used that as grounds to reject my argument. Furthermore, I think it's worth noting that I vocally oppose the kind of mindset that the Prophet of Zod alleges I've been promoting. Like when people were saying that my argument entailed that atheists should be censored, I went onto Trinity Radio, a platform larger than my own, and said this.
Are we saying we should go around and do another crusade basically to stop YouTube atheism? That's not what we're saying here. That is not what we're doing.
No, I'll make it very clear. If that's what my argument entails, then my argument is broken. I think my argument doesn't entail that for the examples we've listed, but if my argument does entail that we should censor atheists, then yeah, that's wrong. The argument should be thrown out. I don't think I could have been any more explicit. And as the old saying goes, nothing puts a dampener on theocratic rhetoric like publicly denouncing the censorship of one's opposition. Lastly, I want to address the allegations made against my character. Neither the Prophet of Zod nor the Godless Engineer seem to think that I made my original video with the intentions that I said I had. And I really want to address this, because I can totally get where they're coming from. Like, if I found an atheist arguing that Christians should delete their channels, my first impression would be that they're probably acting off of poor intentions. So I think it's worth taking the time to clarify that my intentions with my video were, well, what I said they were. I spend a lot of time thinking about how various arguments in philosophy of religion could be modified or improved. I came up with a way of modifying Pascal's wager. The conclusion of the argument was obviously something every atheist YouTuber would disagree with. But I didn't see any flaws in the argument. So I made a video about it to see what other people thought. And if nothing else, now I know. That's the end of this video. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe if you enjoyed this content.